This is the time for you to grab a seat and hear from some amazing authors in conversation with each other. And so with that said, my name is Shanelle Gabriel. I'm the executive director at Urban Word, a nonprofit that does poetry, hip hop, and the arts with young people in over 100 schools every year. I'm also a poet and a singer, and it is my privilege to be announcing this next panel. Latasha N. Diggs Village in conversation with Claudia Rankine. Come on. And y'all got to go in here for free. I'm just saying, this is the stuff that's paid for in places. So really excited to have everybody here. So please grab a seat. I want to make sure you know who the focus is. We're going to really be digging into, that was a pun, we're going to really be getting into Latasha N. Diggs' work and the conversation around their new book. So right now, I'm just gonna give you a bio. Latasha Diggs' work is truly hybrid. Languages and modes are grafted together and furl out insistently from each bound splice. She teaches at Brooklyn and Barnard College and lives here in New York City. As part of the self-interview project, The Next Big Thing, Diggs addressed some of her inspirations for twerk, including the overall desire to communicate with other tongues. As a performer, independent curator, artistic director, and producer, Diggs has presented and performed at a wide and eclectic array of venues, from California Institute of the Arts and the Museum of Modern Art to BAM Cafe and the International Poetry Festival of Romania, okay? So we have some amazing people with you. And Claudia Rankine, no bio needed, an amazing, inspiring author, writer, educator, great thinker, and somebody whose work I constantly reflect on as I create my own work. So please, without further ado, round of applause for Latasha Diggs Village in conversation with Claudia Rankine.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Hi.
Also, Latasha N. Diggs I'm so happy to be here in Harlem, my place of birth. And I'm going to not talk so much. I'm going to go straight into reading. Are y'all okay with that?
Yes.
All right. Performance. To assist my survivors in making arrangements at the time of my departure, I provide the following information. 1. Notification. I desire that my peoples of flighty species, two-legged, winged with domestic and international country codes, and our zip codes, be contacted immediately in order to offer assistance and relief for any milonga thrown for surviving estranged blood relatives. I disinherit all trifling estranged blood relatives. 2. Funeral home director. I desire that no funeral be held. Instead, MVTT, my people's wings without scales, with capricious international country codes, have been consulted in customizing a bedazzled urn and with making the celebratory lampooning roofs arrangements requested in this document. The arrangements have been made and are attached to this document as Exhibit 1. Twilight lore. Somehow, my great aunt Mary Lightfoot erased herself the moment she collapsed on stage. An opera with no recording, no Van Vechten or Van der Zee receipt. What evidence, if any, left available concerning misspellings, aliases, contralto or mezzo, coherent or intoxicated? The surnames and clans I am bound to, as they say, you, mommy, took to the grave. We became mythologies. H over T bordered by an incomplete F, hopscotch over a dress wearing T, an imbalanced scale tittering in I. The T died during double dutch. The L resurrects box as an unequal. Put it on a heel and heal, won't you? But why the Y died? Profile the tribe that liquor built, its window the sheen of wild Irish rose, night train bottleneck clunk, fender bender ascension, conceptual, now Hammond, won't you? Make it a brownstone on St. Nicholas, make it gangrene on the brain, make it an arm amputated, an estranged firstborn, a grandson, prisoner number 291865, make it a cell at Allendale Correctional Facility, bonds denied and in denial. Are the minds your beeswax from a bitter gay grandson? The rapist Ayotli, or the grandson deported to Panama, compliments of Obama, scooped up by missionaries, worn down by a buzz, by HIV, humbling and numbling, or a walk-up near 7th, inside a largely vacant tenement under Eastern European ownership. The flash flood rains outside your door. Tetanus from a flathead, nails, ruined goodies. The wire died. Ladybugs sucked salt from a crack in your ceiling. The former walls, now beams, expose the bruise. Divide are equal to H, to T, and L. Discount dented tumblers, dollar days. On trapeze ease by airborne wings. Pop probiotics. Fizz, binge, flicks, dark ores, bloodshot, and dentures as heirloom. Parakeets in creation, what tired pain brought on a cocoa butter post-war shtick.
Hi everyone, it's so great to be here. And it's so great to be here with my friend.
Yeah.
It doesn't get any better than that. I wanted to start by talking about this incredible book. If you don't own it, you're missing something already in the day. You gotta go get it. It's a book that came out of these very streets, this very neighborhood. Latasha's village, you say in the book, it takes a village to raise a child and it can take a village to destroy one. And I want us to start by thinking about the structure of this book. It's a book that begins with death. Can you tell me why you did that?
So one, thank you so much, Claudia, for agreeing to be part of this. I'm humbled by it, and I'm humbled by the opportunity to talk with you in front of people, because largely our conversations have been private. I started the book with that largely in response to thinking about the lack of literacy, the literacy of what do we do with our loved ones when they're gone, right? That the notion of wills and trust and final instructions can appear sometimes so far and from those without the money to think about that, or even the conversation of like, what are assets? You know, what are assets for someone who doesn't have much? And I also wanted to think about what would be my instructions, but to also toy with the idea of looking at the instructions as poetic form. And so that was one thing. That was a couple of things I was thinking about.
So I've read and taught this book where I teach down at NYU, and we were really struck because the book has actual archival documents from Latasha Diggs' life growing up in this neighborhood. In fact, she was born in the hospital across the street. well, not exactly bored. Do you want to tell that story, or do we?
I think
But she went to that hospital at the time of birth, and was named in that hospital, as is often the case. That happens, and so in the book there are documents that have to do with generational poverty, that have to do with how we make a way in the world. The SSI, food stamps, state issued documents, the hospital workers, notes between themselves around a mother with challenges, and their ability to try and bring forward this child. Was that difficult to include? Because it's very personal information.
Mm-hmm. It was difficult. It was also, I think, when we, like, just piggybacking to this idea of wills and trusts, there's been a lot of talk, a lot of conversation about the archive, right? What is the archive? Who gets to have an archive kept? Who gets to have an archive preserved? And I thought about this being, this, like, my mother's assets are these notes. My mother's archives are these, whether it's a rejection letter or an approval letter from the SSI or from food stamps, or these conversations about my mother's body, her deteriorating health. I was like, they were difficult, one, to hold on to. They were difficult to then enter in. I mean, a lot of times when I was rewriting the book, I would just stop and just put it back in the closet, because I was like, I ain't got no time for, I'm not ready for this. And
you mean that emotionally?
I mean that emotionally. And I think, but part of in the creative zone, and the kind of like thinking of, this kind of like this space of deconstruction, demolition, and what I tend to move towards, experimentation. It was just like presenting this as the archives. Like, what are the archives of someone who is not well known, who we don't assume has a story, right? Or is not part of the story. What is the archive of the everyday person on these streets in Harlem, on 111th Street? What does that look like? And so that's why I wanted to include it.
And the book also has images of apartments that are being renovated.
Yes.
And to me, that was a huge metaphorical statement about the activity of rebirth. That this is a reality in terms of the difficulties of growing up, but also rebirth is always on the other side of that.
Yes.
And the final poem that is in the book is about being born again, but not in a religious way.
Not in a religious way.
But in the way that language can reinstate you into another life. The book is very personal. It's a personal book. It's a poetic achievement, and it talks about your life, but it ties that life to your mother's life. And I wondered if you wanted to talk about that at all.
Yeah. So the last poem, which is Hour of the Star, which I'll read in a couple of seconds, which is tied to the photographs. In 2018, something that's, I would say, not solely a Harlem experience, but an American experience, including their colonies, which include Puerto Rico. My building was sold in 2018. Many people left the building, and the new owner started to demolish apartments while the remaining tenants were in the building. So by 2021, 22, there were only 3 of us remaining in the building. And as much as we tried to find out what we could do, what we could fight, it was pretty much a lost cause. And so this becomes very much part of the editing process. As I'm seeing buildings, apartments being gutted around me and living next to them, they're also gutting out and erasing a history. Stories of many of these people that I talk about who have archives themselves being erased. So it's part of a spatial erasure that's occurring that I've always, been mindful of as I walk around Harlem. And it's a spatial, it's an erasure of the stories of the many people that were part of my upbringing, who shaped my upbringing, for the bad, for good or for worse, And so the last poem, Hour of the Star, it not only becomes this rebirth or announcement of my birth or rebirth, but also an acknowledgement of various birth dates of various people connected to me. Yeah. Hour of the Star. The time is 11 p.m. Was born alive. The time is 8:44 a.m. The mother can read and write. The time is 7:32 p.m. The father is unknown. The time is 5:21 p.m. The infant has been given eye drops at the time of birth. The time is 12:37 a.m. The mother's race is colored. The time is 4:49 a.m. The name for the child will be decided by a nurse, as the mother is high on twilight. As the mother's grandfather died in a sanatorium somewhere near PD. The time is 7:49 a.m. The name for the child will be decided by a nurse, as the mother is under the influence of alcohol at the time of her arrival, as the mother thought the child to be a boy. The time is 5:38 p.m. The mother's residence is unknown. The time is 3:22 p.m. The mother's occupation is field hand. The time is 6:14 a.m. The child is alive. Do you know where your children are?
I wanted to ask you, because the mother functions so, and then it's time for the, so importantly in this book, generationally, what does one learn from the mother in thinking about generational literacy and generational poverty?
That what we learn, what we are unable to learn from our mothers, is not the end of the story. What we learn, what we don't learn from our mothers, can transfer over to us, and in the shaping and reshaping of what could be seen as a village, what could be felt as a village, that literacy comes in different shapes and forms. It comes from random conversations with elders who may not be related to you. It comes from random conversations in Costco. It comes from random conversations on the street. And for someone like myself, I've become shaped by all of those conversations, taking bits and pieces.
Thank you. And now it's your turn. You get to ask Latasha whatever you'd like.
In the space of like language and communication, could you talk a little bit about the role of like the self in where it's kind of like a transaction, like when you're spending time with archives or like with your mother and like that sort of learned experience, how your personal self-identity and previous experiences play into that sort of transaction?
Okay. Well, I heard little bits and pieces of the question, but I'll try to answer it. I think, one thing that was rather difficult in the writing and the rewriting and the eventual editing and completion of this book was the notion that there needed to be some type of resolution, that there needed to be some type of forgiveness to have occurred as being the ending of this book. And what I kind of came to understanding in trying to recall conversations with her or trying to recall incidents with her, that sometimes there is no resolution, right? There is this happened. And so what am I to do with it now? How does it shapes me, but it doesn't necessarily finalize me.
It doesn't define you.
It doesn't define me. Mm-hmm. I hope that, yeah.
Because the idea was the archive in relation to self-formation. And the archive is only the archive. Right. There's a whole lot of other work that gets done over here with the formation of a self. Next question. Things are flying.
I wanted to thank you for your book, because that is really the relationship between mother and child is something that is so very personal, and oftentimes we don't have the words to define what our relationship is with mother and child, because we have so many cliched examples in the world about how these things fall into place. And for those of us who have difficult relationships or unique, relationships with our mothers, there are certain things that happen in the world that is supposed to bring joy. That is supposed to bring joy, but actually are triggers for us. So I want to thank you for giving us. For me, I see it, as like a tool. This book is super important for anyone who's looking to find a way of healing and a way of being at peace with oneself. Because, like you say, once our loved ones leave us, they're in the next realm, but we're left here trying to figure things out. And so thank you for having, providing this as like a tool for all of us, especially Black people, because we come from generations of brokenness, and so this is wonderful. So I just wanted to say thank you.
Thank you very much. Good on you.
Hi, thank you for this book. I'm so excited to read it. You said that it was hard to handle some of the material, around your family. But I also know that in a poetry collection, you have the concept of a speaker. So what's the relationship between the speaker of your poems and you? And were you able to get a little distance through the speaker? And is the speaker always the same entity? Or does it evolve and change over time? And how much distance is there?
There is some distance, and the distance came about with the experiments. To write about, like in particular, there's a piece which is a project proposal for emolument, right? Because what's the hot topic now? Emoluments. Tear them down, build them up. Who are we going to memorialize in marble this year, right? And so it's a project proposal for 2 heroin addicts who I vividly remember as being guardians in the block. I mean, despite their addiction, and one could say they were kind of functional with it, right? Because I never saw them doing anything. 2023 now in Harlem is a whole different landscape. And I think there's things that have shifted in the wild and wacky world of what we show and what we expose, right? And so I wrote this project proposal for Cowboy, and I can't remember his name right now, it's disappearing. But I wrote a project proposal to memorialize them because I felt that these individuals, despite their addictions, let's look at their history. Both of them were Vietnam veterans. And we know anything about the treatment of veterans during the Vietnam War, particularly those of color that got caught up, trying to cope with what was going on over there, end up getting dishonorably discharged over here, and then have to agree to taking methadone for the sake of receiving any type of support, and what methadone does then do. These are individuals that I consider those who've fallen into the cracks, and that who need to be memorialized just as they are just as worthy of the memorialization, right? And so that's how I was able to detach with many of the poems. Many of the poems are written in she, not I, right? And then it's the taking, using the language of legalese, right? Using the language of project proposals, which if you're an artist, you have to write project proposals to get a grant every 2 months. You know exactly what I'm talking about, right? So using that language as a poetic form is a way I did it.
And also, because I happen to know, you started, you put it away, and then she went back to it after a period of time. So there is a book between the beginning of this book,
yes,
and this book.
Yes.
Any other questions?
I know when people usually use traditional or whitewashed archives, they have to sort of fill in the cracks on their own personal history. So when you were going through the archives that you could self-really find within your own history, you still feel the need to fill in the cracks to reimagine what happened and contextualize it.
And not per se. I think the stuff where I use the archive stuff, particularly with the inclusion of them, I let them exist as they are, with no words, no critique, no speculation. And I think that came about from a conversation with a Mexican writer named Yuri Herrera, who writes fiction, nonfiction, but he talked about in a craft talk once about the magic of just the actual facts. No speculation, no embellishment, just let it exist. This is what happened, right? And then in other things, I allow myself to linger within, and this is a conversation me and Claudia have, about the imperfections of memory, right? So what I remember and how memory is not necessarily linear, right? So it's kind of and also there's particles that could be false memories. And then but then allow that to maybe have some embellishing because I'm a poet, right? But yeah, so let certain things be what they are, and then let other things kind of flow within this, like how the brain works.
And can I add a little thing?
Sure.
There's also, Saidiya Hartman talks about critical fabulation, which I think you're in part referring to, and that idea of building in between this moment and that moment. But I think it's different when it's your own story. I think when you're just taking documents and you haven't lived it, then you can critically fabulate. But when you have lived it, memory, wherever it holds you, holds you. Anyone else?
And with that, I would like to say thank you so much. Everyone, please give a round of applause to Latasha N. And thank you so much for being such an amazing moderator, Claudia Rankine. Thank you. And this is probably a really amazing closing to the panels that we have for the day here at the Neale Hurston stage. Please continue to walk around. If you would like to purchase said book, Village, which definitely I know I'm about to go and get, please head over there. Our authors, and as well as the other authors that previously graced this stage, will be over there signing books. Please take it home, share it with someone else, share with somebody else and somebody else, all right? Thank you so much once again. And thank you to yourselves for being such an amazing audience. Please have a great day.